And welcome to our Fields and Features segment, the segment where we talk about coronal holes and sunspots and the magnetism around the Earth, geospace, and so on. That's the first thing we're looking at. We've got like a doubled up plasmasphere environment here around the inner plasmasphere around planet Earth. You're looking at magnetohydrodynamic pressure here over the past 4 hours. It's our geospace magnetosphere movie. Magnetohydrodynamic pressure is shown on this model in nanopascals. Again, that's 4 hours. We're seeing a coronal hole wind stream subsiding, so we're seeing the plasmasphere sort of ringing back into its equilibrated state. It's trying to reach a state of static equilibrium, folks, as everything in the universe is. Next, ground magnetic perturbations. Here's the last 4 hours of changes to Earth's B field from the ground level. Scale modeled here is nanotesla, magnetic flux density. So there's the last 4 hours. Again, we're seeing a coronal hole high-speed stream subsiding here. So we can expect the GOES magnetometers to get a little bit smoother here over the next day or two. There is another coronal hole wind stream headed our way. We'll get to that momentarily. That's the last 3 days of the GOES magnetometer measurements from their geosynchronous near equatorial orbits. And let's take a look at the heliospheric current sheet. There does appear to be a south pole current sheet kind of rushing this way, but then subsiding. So we are expecting to see some activity in the southern hemisphere coming. So don't be surprised to see a sunspot or a large active region rising in the southeast in the next day or two. That's my forecast. Here's the line of sight view. The heliospheric current sheet from Earth's perspective instead of from the top view, also the solar magnetogram depicted here. And next, the coronal hole line of sight plot. We've got some transequatorial south pole oriented coronal holes rotating in. At the moment, some Earth-facing north pole oriented coronal holes. Let's take a look at that from the SDO and 193 angstroms. Pretty well-defined coronal holes. We can expect a high-speed wind stream from them in about 4 days. So coronal holes are possibly the most important feature in solar cycles, but certainly the second most important feature to sunspot number. They give us insight into solar magnetic field progression, the solar polar field reversal process. Next, going to sunspot groups. We've only got 3 groups at the moment. They're all pretty simple. 2953 is beta class, but it's degraded over the past 24. It could be evaporating entirely. 2954 is an alpha class sunspot. It does not have complex magnetic fields that would be associated with major flare production. 2955 has increased its complexity over the past 24. It could be now considered a beta gamma class sunspot. So the most likely place to see major flares now from sunspot 2955, although the overall likelihood of major flares not all that high, as you can see with the solar flare probability monitor here on your left. Next, some more visuals. Here's the 1700 Angstroms Sdo animation over the past 24 hours. You can see barely any umbra there, but 2954 and 2955, at least their primary umbrae, are quite large, indeed larger than the Earth itself. So here's a close-up of the Northern Hemisphere, the only portion with activity significant enough to produce sunspots, and you can see 2953 looking like it's winking out entirely over the past 24 hours. Here's a close-up of 2954 and 2955. And how about another view? It's 94 angstroms, one of the best wavelengths, if not the best wavelength, through which to view solar flares. Shout out to helioviewer.org. So no major flaring over the past 24. Only one significant flare over the past 3 days. It was a C3.1, I believe. So pretty calm conditions in terms of solar flaring. We still do see a minor proton signature here. It's slowly subsiding here over the past week. Yesterday was the 1-week anniversary of the arrival of relativistic particles. They are finally making their way into not showing up on the signal anymore. So next up, the real-time solar wind here. We've seen a recent uptick. Current conditions remaining over 500 kilometers per second at 512 there. Solar wind density about 8.5 protons per cubic centimeter. The BZ has also gone into negative territory here. So if we see this continued negative BZ signal, that's this top pane up here, and this continued 500 plus kilometer per second solar wind speed, we could see a little rise in the KP index, maybe a KP3 or maybe even a geomagnetic unrest scenario. That's the current state of affairs. KP2 is the geomagnetic calm condition. Here's what's going on in the solar system. Here's your 1 week forecast as we approach another new moon. As where things will be in a week, it looks like new moon will be on March 2nd. Shout out to all of our reverse werewolf. Next, the star chart. We've put in the ecliptic and the galactic plane here. The ecliptic is the yellow line. The galactic plane is the blue line. And there are some deep space objects there now that we've also enabled on our in-the-sky.org star chart. And if you're up before dawn, you may see a spectacular planetary pileup of Mars, Venus, Mercury, and Saturn rising ahead of the Sun. And let's close things out with a coronal mass ejection watch. Only some minor activity here from Stereo A and the LASCO C3 over here on your right. So there are our two coronagraphs. Stereo A is located here at Lagrange point 5, trailing the Earth, orbitally speaking, but seeing space weather ahead of the Earth, hence the name Stereo A for ahead. The SOHO LASCO C3 is located here at Lagrange point 1. That would be the right imagery. No coronal mass ejections that are particularly interesting to speak of, just some minor ejecta happening. Thanks for tuning into our Fields and Features segment. Make sure you tune into our bonus features as well for our third daily space weather video of the day. We've been making 3 to shorten up the content, compartmentalize the content a little bit, and just work the algorithms a little. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Congratulations on realizing the channel exists, and may that solar wind be at your back.